It's no secret that Hadoukens aren't what they used to be. Gone are the days of Ryu zoning, and what was once the terrifying, character-defining fireball has been reduced to a slightly longer range poke with a hell of a lot of risk to it. I get it. It's pretty evident that a lot of people aren't fans of zoning and would much rather a quicker, aggressive style of gameplay for the character. That's fair enough. The complexity and joy found in a solid fireball game isn't as evident to those on the outside. It's just seen as a bit boring until you fully understand it. There is a visceral aesthetic to infighting, and the wild swings of momentum provided make for endless entertainment no matter who you are. It's with this knowledge that the ranges that Capcom want you to play Ryu at get closer and closer with each release. He's the main character for the time being, so he's gotta have mass appeal even if I'm not a fan. The nerfs to his fireballs have manifested in a couple of defining ways since Super Turbo. For one, frame advantage. I did a video on this tech specifically a while back, but light fireballs on block in Street Fighter 2 gave you huge frame advantage, allowing for you to frame trap them with a heavy version. This trap made the opponent do something to escape, and gave Ryu the chance to force a guess rather than the other way round, skewing the risk reward on longer range interactions. The other huge way is the increased damage on jump-ins. If you've seen some of the reductive takes on Super Turbo, you might have been led to believe that every character gets a touch of death from a jump-in. This is half true. A lot of characters do, but these are from deep jump-ins or cross-ups. Super Turbo has very low hit stun on jump attacks, and when you combine this with the good recovery on fireballs, you will often be forced as the aggressor to do your attack at the apex of your jump arc, otherwise they'll just recover and punish you. Ultimately this results in you just getting that one hit and maybe some pressure after, but no combo. The range on your jump-ins play a big part in the reward too. In modern titles, the myriad of metered options given in most situations often mean that jump attacks from far ranges can lead to big damage, whereas in FT, often you'll only get to land a sweep follow-up, if that. Lastly, the other characters made fireballs worse. No matter who you're fighting against in a modern title, they will at least have some metered option that can blow through a Hadouken on reaction in a moment's notice. In ST, for a lot of characters, you had to grind your way through zoning, trying to carefully manage your life bar in the process. People talk about how powerful all the aggressive tech is in the game, like input storing, unblockables, TODs, but the reality is, if you actually watch the game, zoning is king until it isn't. The game's playstyles are actually well balanced in this sense. Not to say that this doesn't exist in modern Street Fighter, it's just not to the same extremity. I get that it's entirely subjective, but I miss the flexibility of old Ryu. Everyone has their own perspective on how he should function, each to their own. But I miss seeing him being competent in every aspect of the game, not just okay at mid-range. For me, it makes sense that the poster boy for the franchise can introduce you to all playstyles. It's entirely reasonable if you want to say that I'm just being nostalgic, but for me, the strength of the Hadouken is core to his identity. However, with this knowledge that long-range zoning isn't exactly popular, we can't really expect Capcom to buff the Hadouken. So how do you make a fireball better without making a fireball better? Well, this was a question answered in 1996 by Alpha 2. Fireballs are actually pretty good in this game. It's not ST level, but a damn sight better than the modern version of Ryu's Hadouken. The problem is that Alpha 2 has a universal metered mechanic versus fireballs, and that is the custom combo. Custom combos have invulnerability on them that allows you to go through everything and anything, including projectiles. The reward is pretty huge too, so it's not a small hurdle in the world of zoning to overcome. Capcom tried to balance this, and the idea is there, but the execution unfortunately is not. What did they do? Well, they gave him a fake fireball, done by inputting quarter circle forward and pressing the start button, which we will get back to later because that input is wild. A fake fireball is exactly what it says on the tin. Ryu does the motion of a fireball and even the animation, but no fireball comes out. The intention is obvious. You use it to bait a reaction such as a jump, super or custom combo, and then either get a punish or at least make them waste meter. In theory, this is very powerful. Forcing an opponent to second guess their actions at a far range is impossibly useful in complicating an approach and reducing the amount of practical reaction based tools someone can use aggressively. It's useful to the point where it exists in all versions of Street Fighter, even if it isn't intended by the developers. Inputting quarter circle and pressing light kick as a fake Hadouken has existed since the dawn of time, but the better the tools are for reacting to projectiles, the later you can react. So you won't need to react to the crouch, and instead you can actually see his hands, then super, and there is a huge difference between the two. So this Alpha 2 fake fireball should be good, right? Well, it's fine. For a fake fireball to be good, it can't be vulnerable to the same thing as an actual fireball is. And that's kind of what we have here. A normal fireball sits at about 40 total frames, and the fake version is 29. This is an 11 frame difference. That isn't huge. It's good, but a lot of ranges, things like CCs and supers, still punish you on reaction regardless of whether it's a fake or not. It's an okay tool, but its impact is simply not as big as you would expect it to be from a move designed to bait opponents in a genre where reactions are key. The other very obvious issue is the input. The start button placement isn't universal on anything. I have a bunch of arcade sticks in my house, and the start button is on the front for some, the side for others, and even on the back for a couple. It's clearly not brilliant that if you want to use it in a match, you have to take your hands away from the punches and kicks to try and throw out a bait, then having to move it back when you react to them jumping in. Luckily, we live in a generation of fantastic emulation and mediocre ports, so we can remap start to wherever we like. Unless you play on an arcade cabinet, in which you just kind of have to hope it's in an accessible place. The Alpha series weren't the only games in which you can find a fake Hadouken in, however. It's also in one of Street Fighter's most, I guess, debated titles, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix, and here it works. It really works. Unlike in Alpha 2, the input is reasonable, with it just being quarter circle forward and any kick, so there's substantially less chance of you knocking your opponent's controller out of their hands while you wildly flail trying to find the start button. The frames on it are actually far better too, with a real fireball having 53 to 55 total frames and the fake having 22. Being under half the total frames makes its purpose as a bait very clearly defined and practical. If you throw out a fake and they jump, you will anti-air, and that is what we're looking for. To better understand why this was implemented and why it's relevant to the modern versions of Ryu, we need to understand the wider context of Super Turbo against HDR in terms of balance, which fortunately we can do because David Sirlin did a comprehensive rationale for all of his changes. I recommend you go read them if you get the chance. It's a great resource, even if I don't agree with a lot of them and sometimes they had unforeseen consequences. At least we have a logic behind them which is followable. That's admirable, and most modern developers would not go to these lengths to justify their updates, regardless of the outcome. As I've stated before, in Super Turbo, zoning is very, very strong. Some characters like Faye and Honda, who have incredible rushdown, don't get to use it a lot of rounds simply because of how strong zoning is, and by the time they do get in, their life lost makes these close range interactions skewed against them. To me, this is the philosophy of Super Turbo. Everything is turned up to 10, and it makes for incredible matches where people overcome the odds or have to achieve amazing consistency to win. It's not something I would personally remove from the title, as I genuinely believe it's core to its identity. David Sirlin, however, thought otherwise, and this is not a critique of his ideals about the game, they're just different from mine, and that's alright. So, to make zoning a bit weaker, he gave characters that struggle to get in the tools to get past fireballs, and very generally speaking, made their rushdown weaker for when they do get in. There are exceptions to this, looking at you Honda, but we won't get too deep down that rabbit hole. Some examples of this are Fei Long's light chicken wing, which goes right through fireballs but doesn't provide you with a combo anymore, and E Honda's light headbutt that does the same and gives you a knockdown. Those by themselves are pretty huge dents in one's ability to zone. In retrospect, it feels like a more modern approach to nerfing Hadoukens where people have very direct counters. It's very important to note this change in the meta because if you just put a fake fireball in Super Turbo, it would make difficult matchups versus him basically impossible, as the few answers characters have on reaction to zoning would become near enough useless. So the fake fireball gave Ryu a chance to bait these direct counters to projectiles and keep his Hadouken as a primary tool throughout all matchups, which was so important in maintaining the character's function. It also meant that tech such as the fireball trap that I referred to earlier was still useful. You couldn't just force your way out on reaction, you had to make a more impactful direct read. Even though I don't like the direction of HDR in general, I really like this change when we abstract it as a game outside of Super Turbo and consider the shifts in meta. How to fix fireballs is a question I ask myself a lot. Like I said previously, I want the fireball to be a big part of Ryu's tools and not just reduced to a poke. It's iconic. For a lot of people, it was literally their original interaction with motion inputs. That feeling when you get one out for the first time after trying over and over again sticks with you. And then to later on realise that anyone with one bar is going to clap you for doing it at any range beyond near point blank is kind of disheartening. The trend of direct counters to projectiles isn't going away anytime soon, but I do genuinely believe that something like a fake fireball in a modern title could restore this move's former glory, giving zoning with him more layers and opportunity for interaction between players which are genuinely engaging.